welcome to the TheMinimuhhStory. My name is Mia. In today's episode, I will tell you about my father, what I know, especially what I don't know, about my upbringing without a father figure, and why am I not that curious about my father's side of the family, and a little bit about my Asian heritage. Here's what I know about my father, the facts. Those were told to me when I was a child. My mother, she's dead by now, so I assume they're true. His name was, I don't know if he's still alive. His name is Peter Lee. I don't know when he was born, but I think he should be in his late 60s or 70s by now. He was born in Kuching, the Sarawak province of Borneo in Malaysia. My father, he was educated electrician, but when he moved from Malaysia, he worked his way through Europe, working as a chef and a waiter, and he ended up in Denmark, Copenhagen, where he liked to be. I think my mother, she met him in 1975. According to her, she was told she wasn't able to have any kids. I don't know if that's true, but somehow she got knocked up. I don't know if my father and my mother, they were boyfriend-girlfriend, or if this was a hookup. I mean, it was in the 70s, so, maybe my mother thought it was a relationship and my father, he was just having a good time. I have no idea. They never lived together. We went visiting him in his apartment in one of the nice areas in Copenhagen, or he worked in the center of Copenhagen. I think I met him maybe 10 or 15 times in total when I was a child. Last time I saw him, I was around 7 years old. And I remember it all being a little bit awkward. When we met, he only spoke English, and I didn't speak that much English. It was very difficult for me to understand. However, I remember him telling me, if you call me, I will buy you a Walkman. Yes, that was before iPhones and so on. We listened to music on Walkman in the 70s and in the 80s. And he told me, if you call me, I will buy you a bike. And I remember it being pretty weird and awkward, because of course I wanted a Walkman, of course I wanted a bike and so on. But apparently I was old enough to understand these are things he buys me because maybe he's not that interested in me. So I remember I didn't call him for the bike. My mother, she had a second or third or fourth hand little yellow bike. That was my first bike. It wasn't from my father. But I did get the Walkman, and I was so happy with it. I remember being, I think, 7 years old, yes. We went in, or maybe 8 years old, I don't know. We went into the restaurant where he worked, and we were asking, where is Peter Lee? And they told us, oh, he went to Brazil. It's a carnival season, so he went there to take pictures. So apparently my father, who was educated electrician, who worked as a waiter and a chef, were also being a photographer. Yes, a creative person. So that was, I think, the last time we tried to connect with him, and it was always when my mother reached out, he never reached out to us. This meant later on, of course, I'm curious about my father's side of the family, but I remember the feeling that I wasn't wanted, and it overruled my curiosity. So today, being 42 years old, nearly 43, I'm still curious about where I come from, but I'm not that curious about him as a person, as a father, my father. And it's simply because at a very early age, I got the feeling that I wasn't wanted So I didn't strive for his approval. I didn't call him for that bike. So it rather made me determined that, oh well, I don't need a father. I can't actually remember what my father he looked like. I think when I picture him in my head, and that is what I did my entire childhood, I saw a picture of Bruce Lee, you know, small Asian guy, black hair, a Chinese nose, and not that tall, and with quite a tan. And if I see a picture of me being a child, I see the resemblance. Not that my father was Bruce Lee, but I think he looked quite a lot. Actually, I haven't been that curious about my father's side of the family. I know my mother, she told me that his parents lived in Singapore. I have an older sibling called Nicola, I think, also maybe living in Singapore. And I probably have a lot of other siblings living somewhere in Europe or Brazil or wherever he went. Yes, what makes me curious is that me being diagnosed with the Biertis crystalline dystrophy, the BCD, which is a genetic eye disease that makes my retina simply disappear. It runs in the family. It's a bad gene I inherited from my parents. I have given it onto my son, but luckily he's not disposed for the active BCD due to his father, who is Danish and does not have the same bad genes as I do. My father's side of the family, I'm curious about them in relation to the diagnosis I have. How many BCD patients are there actually out there? I mean, if you have this little Asian guy working his way through Europe, hooking up with, you know, different girls in the 70s, how many potential BCD patients could there be in Europe or wherever? I'm curious about that. I'm also curious about, is this a known disease in my father's side of the family, or what is going on? As I said, I'm not that curious about my father's side of the family. They might not even know that I exist, which is fine. And what I remember about my father, it wasn't worth being curious about compared to the feeling that I wasn't wanted. But I'm curious about the people, the population from where he originates, from Kuching. Which means that I have actually I have made a vision bucket list. And on that bucket list, it's actually a trip to Kuching and Borneo to see the city where he allegedly was born, raised, and to see the people and what life is like in Malaysia. So I'm actually going in a little more than a month. Yes, going to Kuala Lumpur, to Kuching, traveling a little bit around in Borneo, just to see what is it like. I'm not gonna, trying to look up any members of my family. That is not why I'm going. I'm simply going because I'm curious about the people living there, not necessarily who might be in my family. So growing up without a father, I don't know. I wasn't definitely not a daddy's girl because I didn't have one. And I don't think my mother, she acted the way a single parent normally do. They take on the father figure and the mother figure, either single dad, single mom. So I had to figure out a lot of things myself from a very, very young age. It also made me tenacious, and no one should ever try to bully me. I held up my guards really high, and I think some of that might be my Asian genes. I have no idea. I also think that being half Asian, you inherit it both from your mother and your father. even though that they might not be around to teach you whatever. But you have certain characteristics that you inherited, even though that they haven't been around. So sometimes I see some things in myself that reminds me about my mother, which I don't like. So I try to act the opposite when I discover them. And sometimes I figure out, oh my God, why am I acting like this? And then I remember my mother, she told me a thing or two about my father, and it makes perfect sense. She told me, oh, he was so posh. He would go to Aspen because he had friends there to go skiing, and he could just go to France or Sweden or wherever. But he wanted to go there because his friends was there and it was more posh to go. Apparently I'm the same way. How would any day go somewhere exotic in the world to do whatever if I knew somebody there, instead of just going around in my own neighborhood? Also, she told me he had bad eyes. She told me, oh, he's so vain. He doesn't want to wear any glasses. And when he's reading, he's like this. I'm the same way. I rather, with my eye disease, I rather have everything being a blur and being able to move around with not too many impressions going to my eyes and my head, because then I will be completely exhausted after 1 hour. I do it occasionally if I'm traveling, going through an airport or wherever. I put on my glasses or contact lenses. But I rather sit with my iPhone like this and not wearing glasses. That's it for today. I hope you appreciated my little story about my father, my upbringing without a father. Why am I not curious about him or his relatives, yet curious about my heritage? This is also one of the small pieces in the Minimuh puzzle that makes me to who I am today. So an upbringing without a father, feeling not welcome yet curious, and the fact that I had to figure out a lot of things of myself. I had to find out how to protect myself, and with no father, no mother teaching me how to. And I think it ended up quite well, even though I was raised by a single mother who wasn't able to do that. Also the fact that I am curious about my heritage according to my diagnosis with BCD. I have recently got connected with some people around the world, some in Asia and some in the US and some in Europe, and we are trying to create a network for Beatrice, for the BCD patients, because no one really knows a lot about this disease, and we're trying to create a network connecting, so we have some people to talk about this who actually can relate to it. So maybe in this work I will figure out something more. I don't know. Take good care. Take care of your family. If you are so lucky to have a loving mother and a father, take good care of them. Also when they get old and grumpy. And remember to smile at a stranger.